Well, good morning and a very happy Sabbath. And it's good to be here again as we study that magnificent portion of the book of Daniel, the closing chapters. I'd like to invite you to bow your heads as we seek the guidance that we do require and the presence of the Holy Spirit. Let's bow our heads. Heavenly Father, we thank you for the opportunity that we have to study your word. Lord, that it contains the details that verify the accuracy, the dependability, and the truthfulness. And Lord, that it may fortify our minds and that we may seek your will in every respect of our lives. So bless us now in Jesus' precious name. Amen. Chapter 10 and chapter 11 and chapter 12 are one piece. We discussed this last week. I just wanted to come back again to the 11th chapter of the book of Daniel. And the reason is that the details of the predictions are so good that they're almost too good to step over too quickly. So we would like to spend some time with this. And so one of the most remarkable predictions is this one. If you bear in mind that this was made in the year 536 BC, when with the force of a flood they shall be swept away. This is about the enemies of Tiberius Caesar. I've got here on the slide when he actually lived, and in fact he ruled from 14 AD to 37 AD. From before him and be broken. And then there is this exquisite detail. And also the Prince of the Covenant. Also the Prince of the Covenant. Now we know that this is Jesus. That this is Christ. That Christ would be broken. He would come to an end during the reign of Tiberius Caesar. Now you recall of course that he was brought before Pontius Pilate. Pontius Pilate only served under the governorship of Tiberius Caesar. He did so from 26 to 36 AD. Now we know that Jesus was crucified in 31 AD. And so it is a remarkable prediction that a few hundred years before the prediction is given, and it is so accurate. It is so accurate. Now, what Jesus did for us puts us in the position that we have a hope and a certainty. And when you look at this particular prophecy, when you look at this writing that we know that was written there in the latter part of the 6th century BC, it is remarkable when we see the details here. The angel Gabriel gives an account of the historical details of what will happen to the people of Daniel. There in the 14th verse of chapter 10, he tells him that he will give him the details. And we went through a lot of historical facts. I know, we went through many, and I don't intend to do this again. But there are a few aspects here that we need to touch on. The fourth Persian king would be the richest, he predicted. He will engage in warfare with Greece. We talked about that. That was in 490 BC. Greece succeeds Medo-Persia. We know that also is a fact. In 331, there was the Battle of Arbela, and that was the decisive switch from the Medo-Persian Empire to the Grecian Empire. Greece would be broken up in four parts. Remarkable, the details, and it exactly as it occurred. Alexander's posterity would not rule. He had a son who did not take over from his dad. Liaison between the king of the north, the daughter of the south. This involves, of course, the demise of Berenice, predicted, absolutely fulfilled. The revenge of the murder of her by her brother Euergetus, who prevailed. What a detail! Exactly the way it happened. A response attack from the king of the north, which would fail. That's what happened. Repeated attempts. The king of the north finally succeeded to take revenge. The description and the introduction of pagan Rome is fantastic and very clear there in the 11th chapter of the book of Daniel. I want to draw your attention to this. When we look at the details, and you're aware that some people will say that this Daniel was a 2nd century BC, during the era of the Maccabees. Now that is a gross mistake. You know, the Dead Sea Scrolls reveal the copies, of course, of at least portions of the book of Daniel, and quite significant portions. And we know that we can carbon date these, and these are 2nd century BC. And of course, they're copies of copies of copies. But let's say, if Daniel were to be, as some of the higher critics say, a 2nd BC prophet, how could he know all the things that I'm going to list for you here right now? Rome would invade Judah. That happened in the 1st century BC, 64 BC. Have a look at this one. The liaison between Julius Caesar and Cleopatra, which was only a short time before he was assassinated in 44 BC. How could you explain Cleopatra's self-interest? How could you explain that Julius Caesar would conquer? He wasn't even born, obviously. This is incredibly detailed, that he would conquer, that he would be assassinated, and not just assassinated, but he would be assassinated in his hometown, which is exactly what happened. And so the description and introduction of Caesar Augustus, a raiser of taxes. Caesar Augustus would die a natural death. This is by way of exception. He died a natural death. That he would be succeeded, obviously, as we know, by Tiberius, who would get there by intrigue. He didn't have to fight for it. The description and the introduction of his successor, under whom, as we know, Jesus would die. And that is exactly what happened. How could you know this if you were a few hundred years in existence before these events? We know that the whole of the book of Daniel is one literary piece, easily defended. And 536 we get some 20 details, conditions that tells you that he is indeed a 6th BC century prophet. I love the evidence, the Pax Romana, anywhere from the reign of, say, Caesar Augustus to the latter part of the 2nd century AD. The description of event by papal Rome. The book of Daniel is very specific here. The papal persecution till the time of the end. The time of the end clearly is very easily identified as the year 1798. You'll find that a number of times. That expression, the time of the end, is only an expression that you find in the book of Daniel. And it's very definitive as to what year this may be. And we'll come back to that. 1798, if you can remember that. The papal apostasy is well described, very well described. And till the 39th verse, we have some 24 predictions that have actually historically found place. And then there is an added element to this. There is a chronology of these events. If you were to work out a mathematical computation of the possibility of coincidence of these 24, and we just have 24 here, 24 predictions in a chronological order, the astronomical figure could not be put on the screen. It is an absolute certainty that the book of Daniel was inspired. And so we have the king of the north, we have the king of the south. And the king of the north and the king of the south initially starts off with the Seleucid rulers and the Ptolemaic rulers that ruled Egypt, if you can get that clear in your mind. That's where it starts, the king of the north and the king of the south. Now it says here, at the time of the end. This Daniel 11 verse 40 starts with 1798. And it says here, at the time of the end, and this is a very unique expression in the Hebrew language. You'll only find it in the book of Daniel. At the time of the end, in 1798, therefore, and the Hebrew word eikates is unique to the book of Daniel, very unique. At the time of the end, at the conclusion of the 1260 years of persecution, The king of the south shall attack him. Now, him here is the king of the north. And we know from history who the king of the south is, because the attack is actually easily explained from an historical reality when on the 15th of February, 1798, the general of Napoleon Bonaparte, General Berthier, actually came into the Vatican and took Pope Pius VI prisoner, who actually died in exile a year later in the south of France. So the king of the south is, of course, France. That is the France that came from the French Revolution. And that makes it very interesting. And the king of the north, that is the papacy, shall come against him like a whirlwind. This is a process that found place years after, with chariots, horsemen, and many ships, and shall enter the countries and overwhelm them, and pass through. This is not a military campaign by the papacy, but this is a campaign of tremendous influence. And that is so confirmed by history. If we look at the French Revolution, what an incredible time that was. Life was cheap. And all the standards, the morality were thrown aside. People were rebelling against state and church. But the French Revolution laid the foundation for communism. It truly did. Communism had its origins of the French Revolution. You can look at Lenin, Trotsky, English, you look at the philosophies that they studied, they all came from the French Revolution. And of course, men like Stalin and Mao Zedong implemented a very brutal system, of course, of this. So we have a two-world power situation. We really have communism on the one hand, we have the communism on the one hand, and then we have capitalism on the other hand. And we know that capitalism supported the papacy. It is well entrenched. There was a balance of power which lasted for some 70 odd years. And many of us that have the right age lived through that. What is very remarkable, that the Union of the Soviet Unions was actually dissolved in 1991, which is a major event, which again fits very well with the prophecies. And when we come to the book of Revelation one day, we will study that even further. But I like the description here in chapter 11, verse 41. He shall come, enter the countries, overwhelm them, and pass through. This is not a military campaign. This is really a campaign of influence, responding and correlating to what you find in Revelation 13. And the whole world marveled and followed the beast. That is what is predicted here in the book of Revelation. Now, there is a impending collaboration between the papacy and obviously the main Western powers. And we'll talk about that one day, I hope, when we will study the book of Revelation. I just want to have a very strong and proper foundation here for the last chapter there of the book of Daniel. He shall enter the glorious land, that is the church. And even he will be, as we see, he has been busy with interface, asserting himself or itself with all the other religions as well. And many countries shall be overthrown. It's interesting that the word countries was not there and shouldn't be there, but it's there. Many shall be overthrown. Many will come under his influence. Of late, in the last few years and decades, we have seen a tremendous increase in the ecumenical movements, a move towards the mother church, of course, of Rome. And it is amazing how strong that is right now. And many of them are now associating. Here is another one that is very interesting. He shall stretch out his hand against the countries, notice, and the land of Egypt. Now that, of course, Egypt, spiritually speaking, this is not Egypt today. This is spiritual Egypt. Spiritual Egypt, of course, is represented by communism. It is represented by atheism, and particularly the extremes there. We can see that he shall have power over the treasures of gold and silver. Now this is a statement that is so tempting to dwell further on, but I mustn't, because we have still the whole of the chapter 12 to deal with. Over all the precious things of Egypt, note the language, and the Libyans and the Ethiopians shall follow at his heel. This is an expression that there is a financial interest, a financial capacity. There's a tremendous possession by this institution when it comes to world finance, and how tempting it would be to dwell on that. Daniel 11 verse 44. This verse is very, very good. News from the east, note this carefully. News from the east and the north shall trouble him. That is the king of the north, that is the papacy. Therefore he shall go out with great fury and do what? Destroy and annihilate many. Note that verse. News from the east, from the north, shall trouble him, therefore he shall go out with great fury and destroy and annihilate many. Now that is a very interesting verse. News from the east. The significance of the east and the north, you can appreciate if you understand the connotations. The east is deliverance. The north is judgment. Let me show you. The word here, Misrach, is really a sunrise. And that reminds me of what Jesus said. It reminds me. Because for as the lightning, Jesus said, shall come from the east and flashes to the west. And now you will remember this there in Matthew 24. So will the coming of the Son of Man be. That is what he said. So a message from the east is a message about the second coming, the return of Christ. Now that from the north, Tzophon is an expression with a connotation of judgment, a connotation of a secret place where only divinity dwells. And we know that after 1798 there is a three angels message which begins with the hour of his judgment. And that is 1844. And then you have this aspect, I will also sit on the mount of the congregation. You might recall Isaiah 14, where it really talks about Lucifer. Lucifer has an ambition. He wants to be in the council of God. In fact, on the farther side of the north is significant. It is where the deity dwells. Because he wants to be like the Most High. Elyon means the Most High God. That's what he wants to be. That has always been his ambition. And he works through an instrumentality that claims to be God on earth. And so therefore he shall go out with great fury and destroy and annihilate many. There will be a persecution. He shall plant the tents of his palace between the seas. And I alluded to that last week, that the seas are the multitudes of the people. And the glorious holy mountain that is God's dwelling place. And he shall come to his end. He will be destroyed supernaturally. Not by humanity or human hands. And no one will help him. No one will be able to help him. And Paul puts it so well in his letter to the Thessalonians, that the lawless one will be destroyed by the brightness of his coming. This is an incredible chapter. Now we go back to the verse 39 and see what we can add by way of predictions. Rumors from the east, the second coming, The second coming to be after 1798. The Bible is correct. Impending judgment on papal Rome. Investigative, chapter 7. Number 28, end time persecution. There will be an end time persecution against the people of God. The king of the north will be destroyed. By the brightness of his coming, there will be an executional part of that judgment. And number 30, the last, God's people will be delivered. That is the promise. And so the angel continues. At that time, Michael shall stand up. Now, Michael we know is Jesus. And this is an interesting statement. Shall stand up. Shall stand up. If he is the judge, if Michael, if Christ, as we saw in chapter 7, is the judge, and he stands up, then clearly he is the judge. And when the judge stands up, the court case is finished. Probation is closed. And this is the end of the investigative judgment. The great prince who stands watch over the sons of your people, Gabriel said to Daniel, and there shall be a time of trouble. And he qualifies that. He said, "Such there never was since there was a nation." And I just look at it this way. The end of probation, the close of probation after that 7 last plagues will be poured out on those who have been rebellious against God and have persecuted God's people. There will be a time of trouble with an intensity that has never occurred. Study the 7 last plagues as they are recorded in the book of Revelation. And even to that time, and at that time your people will be delivered. As number 30 of the prediction mentioned, God's people will be delivered. And everyone who is found in the book, that is the book of life or the book of the Lamb. And so that prophecy says this: many of those who sleep, that is, who have died, of those who sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake. Now we know when Jesus returns, there will be a resurrection. There will be a resurrection of all of those in Christ. But here is a qualification that is very unique. It says here, many of those who sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake, some to everlasting life, but not apparently all. Some to shame and everlasting contempt. Now here is a very special resurrection is actually announced. Let's look at it. Look at Revelation 1 verse 7. Behold, he is coming with clouds. Now, this, you can imagine, are not atmospheric clouds. Really, these are billions of angels who at a distance look like clouds. And they will come with him. They're coming with him. And what an incredible sight that will be. It'll be every eye will see him. And they who what? Pierced him. It would be apparent that those who were there at that time at Calvary, who crucified our Lord, and probably the main instigators of this crucifixion, they will be there. They will be a witness. They will see him come. What a tremendous, fearful aspect. Some to shame and everlasting contempt. And all the tribes of the earth will mourn because of him. That is all of those who have opposed God's people. You know from the book of Revelation, those who keep the commandments and have the faith of Jesus and the faith in Jesus. And then he will actually, as he said, he'll bring his reward with him. What a terrible thing to look forward to, if that would be you. Then again, look at the Sanhedrin. Jesus stood before the Sanhedrin. They were questioning him. They thought they were judging him. No. They really judged themselves. When they pressed him to concede that he claimed deity to be the Son of God, he said, "It is as you said. Nevertheless, I say to you," he said, "nevertheless, I say to you, hereafter you what? Will see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of power, which is another word for God's power, God himself. And coming, note this, and coming with the clouds of heaven. It is coming towards them. They will see the one that they condemned and couldn't wait to have him crucified by the Romans. That is what will happen. They will be brought back to life and be a witness to this. Some to everlasting life. Here's another interesting prediction. It says in the great controversy, all who have died, this is interesting, all who have died in the faith of the third angel's message come forth from the tomb, now notice, glorified, that is to everlasting life, glorified, to hear God's covenant of peace with those who have kept his law. It is about the law. If you love me, Jesus said, you keep my commandments. And so the angel tells him more. He says, those who are wise shall shine. This is, of course, in the ages when those who feared God and shared the truth did so bravely under the most forbidding circumstances. Those who are wise shall shine like the brightness of the firmament, and those who turn many to righteousness like the stars forever and ever. And I think particularly of the people like the Waldenses. What an amazing people they have been. And all of those who continued to bring the word of God under forbidding circumstances to others. But you, Daniel, shut up the words. Seal the book. This is fascinating. Seal the book until the time of the end. The time of the end, 1798. Many shall run to and fro. That's an Hebraic expression of many shall study. And knowledge shall increase. That is knowledge of the book of Daniel. And at the conclusion of the 1260 days, and that is of course 1798, an understanding will come to the people. And I have to mention the one that I admired the most. And that is a man by the name of Joseph Wolf. He was Jewish, but he turned to Christianity. And it was the Bible that convicted him. And this man became a missionary. And he was a missionary to the world. The story of Joseph Wolf is humbling. It is fascinating. He heard from some of the pagan priests, or not pagan priests, but the priests in the Middle East, where he traveled extensively and encountered many dangers and suffering. They told him that there was a prediction that Jesus would return. And they made him aware of a time of prophecy in the book of Daniel. And he studied that. And he started to preach that. Robert Winter in England, others, Manuel de la Cunza in South America, Bengel in Germany, Goshen in Switzerland, and the child preachers of Scandinavia, and I'll tell you in a minute about this, and particularly William Miller in North America, in different parts of the world, people who had no contact with each other began to understand, and this is a phenomenon that is well recorded, they began to understand the time prophecy of Daniel, and they saw and studied and computed the fulfillment of the 2,300 years. And they worked it out when that would be. They worked it out. This had to be 1844. Initially, they made a little mistake, 1843. Then they came to 1844, and they believed that that was going to be the end of the world. The child preachers in Scandinavia. In Scandinavia, the state religion was Lutheranism. And anybody preaching contrary to the catechism of Luther, they would be imprisoned. It is fascinating. Martin Luther is on the record as having said that Christ should return in about 300 years. That is what he believed. Isn't that amazing? And so here it is. Did he have some understanding of the time prophecy of Daniel? I doubt it. But that is what he believed. The child preachers, They interviewed the people who were there. In the poorer classes, which is the bulk of the people in Scandinavia, children, 10, 12, in fact, even some of them as young as 8 years of age. They put them, as the picture points out here, on the table, and they began to preach with a knowledge way beyond their years. And they preached on the book of Daniel. They preached on the second coming. They preached on the fulfillment of the 2,300 years, which is an incredible phenomenon, but it is well recorded. And so it was all around the globe, hundreds of thousands of people. They were called Adventists, by the way. They were waiting for the coming of Christ. But of course, even William Miller, though he calculated everything so well, he was a farmer who became a Baptist preacher. The culmination of the 2,300 years was correctly calculated. But they made a mistake. They believed that the cleansing of the sanctuary, and this is important because Daniel lays the foundation for the book of Revelation in this. It explains not just the computation and the calculation, but what actually occurred. There was going to be a great disappointment because people believed that the sanctuary was represented by this world and that the cleansing, and they assumed by fire, would find place. In other words, the end of the world was coming, and that had to mean the second coming. Of course, they made a mistake. They did not account for the heavenly sanctuary and the fact that Jesus transferred from the holy to the most holy place, where, of course, he began his work as judge, as so well described in the book of Daniel, the 7th chapter. And so, the night Daniel looked, it says here, and there stood two others, and one on this riverbank, and the other on the other side of the riverbank, and one to the man clothed in linen, who was above the waters of the river, said this: how long will the fulfillment of these wonders, these incredible things be? Then I heard a man in linen, clothed in linen, who was above the waters of the river. This is, of course, the personhood of Christ. Who he held up his right hand and his left hand to heaven. So this is an oath that he takes, and swore by him who lives forever, this is deity, and that it shall be for a time, times, and half a time. And there are again the 1260 years. Time in the times, the double, one time, a half, 3.5 years. Times here means years. 3.5 years, 42 months, 1260 days. You'll find it in the book of Daniel. You'll find it in the book of Revelation. The two are so closely related, the two books. And when the power of the holy people has been completely shattered, after these things shall be finished. Shall be finished. Although I heard, Daniel says, I didn't understand. Now, Daniel understood much of the visions. He actually understood all of them, but one. The one of the vision that he didn't understand was what is called in Hebrew the Mareh. And that was the vision of the 2,300 years. He couldn't get his mind around it. It was too big for him to comprehend. Too big. So he said, my Lord, what shall be the end of these things? And then he said this: go your way, Daniel. Now, this is amazing. Look what the text says. For the words are what? Closed up. They're closed up. They sealed till the time of the end, 1798. And that is when the movement of the Advent movement truly was beginning and gaining tremendous ground. When people were expected Jesus to come. And that is well recorded again in history. sealed till the time of the end. Now I'll refer you to Revelation, the 10th chapter. I can't resist. Have a look at this. John on the island of Patmos, 95, 96 AD. I still saw another angel coming down from heaven. Notice, clothed with a cloud. A rainbow was on his head. His face was like the sun. His feet like pillars of fire. And he had a little book open. The emphasis in the Greek here on open, which means it was closed before. And he set his right foot on the sea and his left foot on the land. Placing your foot on the land and the sea is ownership. This is Christ, the Creator. And then he said to John, who actually typified the church of the time, you must prophesy again. There was a prophesying about the fulfillment of the 2,300 years. Daniel lays the foundation for that. The book of Revelation describes that. And it was a bitter disappointment. But they had to go and prophesy again. Why? They had to tell the truth about what actually happened at the fulfillment of the 2,300 years. And so this is where we as a people, the Seventh-day Adventist Church, really was born. You must prophesy again about many people, nations, tongues, and kings. Daniel 12, verse 10. Many shall be purified, made white and refined. When they hear the truth, they will accept by the grace of God. But the wicked shall do wickedly, he said, the angel, and none of the wicked shall understand. But the wise, they shall understand. And from the time that the daily and the word sacrifice should never be there. The Hebrew word tamid means continual. It is the sanctuary services that we're familiar with the earthly sanctuary of the priest as he walked into the holy place. And the abomination of desolation is set up. There's an interesting statement for further, precision of our understanding of this. The abomination of desolation, Jesus even talked about that. And of course he referred to Daniel. Is being set up. This is something that is in progress. There shall be 1,290 days, an extra 30 days, an extra 30 years. How are we to read this? Well, it's not difficult really if you know your history. I'll give you the story of Clovis. Clovis was the first French king, the king of the Franks. He united what we know today as France. And as he united them, he became the first king. And his wife was a Christian. And in the year 508 AD, this man was baptized. And of course, he was a devout, convicted Roman Catholic and supporter of the Bishop of Rome, who still had the problems that with the Aryan Germanic tribes, like the Ostrogoths, that were of course, in Rome at the time. But in 508 AD, this man allowed the expansion and to increase the control of the Bishop of Rome. When you study what was done by Clovis and the tremendous support that he gave the Bishop of Rome, defeating the Visigoths, who were originally Arian, and later on also helping the Bishop of Rome to do what it desired to do, that is to control all the Christian churches. You add that, then from 508 to 1798, you get exactly the required 1,290 years. Clovis was baptized on Christmas Day. That's a good day to pick, in 508 AD. And here's another one that has puzzled some commentators. Blessed is he who waits and comes to the 1,300 and 35 days. What are we to make of that? Again, the same story applies. This still is in the time when the abomination is being set up. The abomination of desolation, promoted by Clovis, that Frankish king who was baptized in 508 AD. And so the fulfillment of that particular prophecy, the 1,335 years, will bring you to 1844 by Roman computation. That is the Julian or the Gregorian calendar. And so here we have another fulfillment of prophecy and an affirmation of prophetic times. And it is remarkable that it is given to us. But here is the interesting thing. We are the beneficiary of what Daniel wrote. Daniel didn't understand these times. He just didn't. He couldn't. And then it says this, you go your way till the end, you shall rest. In other words, you will pass on. And will arise, that is with the resurrection, to your inheritance at the end of the days. Daniel in the grave, awaiting the resurrection, together with the many, many saints that have died in the faith of Jesus. And so there is really only one King of the North. When we look at this impressive collection, and we know God is in control. And that is what Daniel believed. And I hope that you will keep this belief yourself. Whatever happens, God is in control. And the book of Daniel proves that. May He bless you. Shall we bow our heads? Heavenly Father, we thank you for the prophecies of the book of Daniel. It's been an incredible book, and you have favored us with so much evidence of who you are. But not just that you know the end from the beginning, but all the provisions and the care that you have shown your people. And we can count on the reward if we stay connected with Jesus, if we stay connected and true to you. Help us to be the people that you want us to be. Keep us near to your heart. In Jesus' precious name, amen. God bless you.